One of the most cunning killers they've ever had to trace.
Could I have done more? Should I have done more?
Police are investigating the discovery of a woman's body.
28-year-old Wilma McCann.
People read in the newspaper of prostitutes being killed. They shrug and move on.
It was desperate times. It just seemed to be a one-off murder. Another body was found.
This was the ultimate crime against women.
They had a similar type of injuries to a legendary Victorian killer.
The so-called Yorkshire Ripper.
The police inferred if you were not a prostitute, then you were fine.
The Yorkshire Ripper has struck again.
Unlike the previous victims, she was no prostitute.
My God.
Any woman was at risk.
This murder changed everything.
The anger was now at boiling point.
5 years is too long. If they haven't caught him yet, I don't think they ever will.
He had successfully hoodwinked an entire police force.
The police were actually excluding evidence.
You cannot conceive of what it was like.
I'm the Ripper.
I thought they will never catch him.
Never. Ever. He controlled us all.
He was the last person in the world that you'd have suspected.
Hello, and welcome to the Cinemondo podcast with Kathy, Mark, and Burke, talking about movies. Horror, sci-fi, unusual, unknown, forgotten, underappreciated, true crime, documentary, always interesting.
We love true crime documentaries.
We love true crime.
I say we, but I mean me. I force everyone else to watch them.
The singular we.
I have a love-hate thing. I really get into them once I start watching them, but I dread going into it because reality to me like that, the reality of murders and things like that just is depressing to me. And sometimes can be really heartbreaking and really, life-changing in the case of one, particular documentary true crime thing that Kathy and I found ourselves involved with in a very serious way for many, many years. So I think But
that one had a happy ending. The West Memphis 3 case, they got out of prison.
Sort of, but the murder was never
innocent
solved.
Men. The murder's not solved, but we got people who were accused of the murder who didn't do it out of prison. So that's a good thing.
They did get out of prison, yeah. But
we still need to find the killer. Yeah. The killer's still not.
For me, true crime, I mean, a lot of these docs are not just one episode, they're multi-series, like 4 or 6 episodes. And I can do that much, but if it goes longer than that, I start to say, okay, I've seen enough of the death and murder. Let's move on to something else.
I never get enough of that.
I'm
good.
I like it, but I like when it's just like a 4 or 5 episode
4 or 5 is about right. Because at some point you just want to see the person get caught.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I don't want to present another person dying. Here's another person that's murdered. It's like, oh my God, this is tough. And
like I have a hard time. I like listening to true crime podcasts and watching the true crime shows on Discovery. It's sad. I almost hate going into them. I end up liking them as I go in. The ones that are unsolved, like unsolved mysteries, or like there's a documentary or a series called Disappearance where they don't really know what happened to these people. I find those really frustrating, but also kind of creepier because you don't really know what happened. So there's all these theories. Yeah, I think that's why I like the Unsolved Mysteries too. That new reboot by Netflix.
Yeah,
they're unsolved, but at the same time, like the number of like scenarios makes it even more compelling. Mm-hmm. Instead of the quick wrap up of, they caught the guy. And most of these, we already know they caught the guy. Like Night Stalker, we know he got caught.
Right.
So you're watching it just sort of waiting for the shoe to drop because you know he's going to get caught. But some of these that are I like the more obscure crime where you don't really know what's happened.
Well,
the Ripper was one of the, I think the Ripper, this isn't Jack the Ripper. The show we're going to talk about today is called Ripper, right? Is it just the Ripper?
Yeah, and we just saw the trailer for that. So that's the trailer we just saw.
It's not Jack the Ripper. It's Yorkshire Ripper.
No, it's the Yorkshire Ripper, who was from like 1975 to 1980 in the UK and in Great Britain, in like the Midlands, what they call not London, but some of the other smaller cities to the north. And I find this one is interesting to me in a lot of ways, but you get a sense of the time and place.
Yeah,
that's the fascinating part, is the time capsule aspect.
Yeah, it's one thing, of course. Here's a guy that's going around and murdering women, mostly prostitutes, but not all, or initially prostitutes. So
it's initially reported that they're prostitutes.
Right. And that's such a major part of it.
There were prostitutes, and then there were innocent women.
Right.
Huge difference between
that was it's interesting, because I heard a lot of pushback on this documentary, people complaining that they were talking, the whole documentary overall was talking about women as that they were prostitutes, and they weren't saying sex workers, they were saying hookers and prostitutes, and that they would, like we're saying, the distinction between innocent women and then the prostitutes. But that was the whole point, is how sexist and horrible the police were, and that by being that way, they could have solved it a lot sooner if they hadn't classified these women as prostitutes, and that the killer hates prostitutes. Like, who? I looked at it, this guy's crimes, hates women. I'm not seeing the hates prostitutes. So that was that total discriminatory language that a lot of people didn't like hearing about when this documentary came out. But I think they're missing the point that was the whole reason that it was shown this way, is because, and they talk about it in the show. So I'm not quite sure what people were beefing about.
Well, the thing is, it's not a coincidence that a prostitute is a person who will get in the car with you,
right?
And that's the availability of victims. I think the guy hated women, and
definitely,
and prostitutes were available to him, and as horrible as that sounds, it was a convenience kind of a thing.
Well, a lot of serial killers do that because they're considered like a low risk victim, that people won't miss them if they're gone for a little while. They will willingly get into a car with you. They'll willingly go to another location. See, those are the things that it doesn't make them any more, like, oh, it's her fault. It just makes her more like an easier target for someone who wants to do something terrible.
Yeah. But this was an interesting, like Mark was saying, an interesting documentary about the murders, but it also was an interesting portrait of those times in England and how desperate. And I think we talked earlier about this, and we were talking about how it was sort of the birth of punk rock, that attitude of no future and how awful everything is, and what the hell, why not just go ahead and break everything and smash it up,
Well, the mid 70s in Great Britain. I mean, this is when it was all about deindustrialization. Like all the big, like British Leyland was a big car manufacturer. That was what people in the Midlands, they worked, making those cars. And that, in the 70s, Japanese cars took over, and that just died.
Yeah.
And people lost their jobs. So poverty is everywhere, and you really get a sense of what a bummer it was to live there.
Yeah.
And the weather and just everything was just breaking down.
And the industrialization of it, like it created such a vacuum for women to be employed at all. So a lot of them had to turn to sex work because of that.
Right.
Yeah. That's the sad thing too about this, is you see a lot of these women, it's not like they grew up saying, I want to be a prostitute when I'm get older, it's like, no, that's not how that happens generally. Just
surviving. And to put a finer point on them, a lot of them weren't prostitutes.
Yeah.
And that was the judgment call being made by police.
They were just poor women who were kind of down on their luck and having a hard time and dealing with this nightmare economy and everything. Yeah. It's similar in a way to the other true crime documentary we talked about in another episode about the Night Stalker murders in Los Angeles, with the Richard Ramirez murders. Those times were pretty bad in Los Angeles, and you kind of get the feeling that that's sort of where a lot of the angst of punk rock came from, the LA punk, is those times. Things were different back then too, as far as the technology and everything. There weren't cell phones and there weren't security cameras everywhere.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Talking with, I think I mentioned this in the other one, we have a friend who's a forensic scientist, and we talk with him about, things like this. And one of the things he says is, or one of the things that we talked about, I don't know if I want to put words in his mouth like this, but we've talked about the fact that there aren't any, notorious serial killers on the loose right now. We're not hearing about the the Shropshire Slasher or anything like that. It's those kind of things have kind of disappeared from the landscape of news and home invasion type things. And I think it's because of advanced security systems. You know, everybody's got cameras. Everybody hears about crimes being solved now. Everybody hears about DNA. You know, if you leave just a hair, they can find you, you know. Yeah. So serial killers back then, you know, during the times of this one, the Ripper, this guy was, and with Richard Ramirez, he could leave all kinds of evidence behind, and the police wouldn't be able to use it, you know, and there would be no,
or they chose not to use it. Like the evidence they did have, they kind of ignored, and then they were given all these red herrings by, you know, like they were sent a recording that clearly wasn't him. There was some evidence and some things that they put way too much prominence on, and then they totally ignored stuff that they could have caught the guy earlier.
A lot of times it seems to me that's one of the things we remember with the case that we got involved with, is that the police went with even the most ridiculous thing that someone would say, just because they're like, okay, we have nothing else. We have, and they got that in the Ripper, they got that recording, you know, that Kathy just mentioned. And it's like, I am the Ripper, you know, and
so they all make him believe it. I guess he is. He says
they
he
just
is.
Run with it. They assume that this is the actual voice of the Ripper, and that he has this certain accent. So therefore he must be from this one little area right here. Yeah. So they focus everything on that little area.
And, well, this is the West Yorkshire Police Department. They're working in a vacuum. They're not they're just doing everything themselves. Meanwhile, he goes to like a town like Manchester, which is it's not like, you know, 10 hours away. It's just, you know, whatever, an hour away. But that's a whole different world, a whole different police department. They don't talk. And there's so many mistakes. And again, the misogyny of thinking, oh, it's just prostitutes. It's not a big deal. Yeah. But then a 16-year-old girl, you know, a schoolgirl, totally innocent, not a prostitute, not a sex worker.
Innocent.
Innocent.
Gets murdered. And all of a sudden they just, you know, it turns into something else. And it turns into now it's everybody's problem, you know.
Well, you know, this is an ongoing problem, even why a lot of these crimes were solved ahead of time, even like the Hillside Stranglers, is that when police would find a prostitute who was killed, they were just like, oh, well, put it on the back burner. We got bigger crimes to solve.
That's the thing. It
they just don't bother.
That's the life she chose. So she deserves it, you know.
Yeah. So it's like, this was sort of almost, you know, not the beginning of it, because it's been constant, you know, throughout society, but it was a really good depiction of, you know, this disregard for women, first of all, that weren't sex work. they weren't even prostitutes,
or even if they were, you know, it's
you know, but that's what's so weird. Like, why would they think that? Because she was out late at night, so now she's a prostitute. Like, it was weird. And also, I really thought it was interesting where they had eventually the stuff, it was getting so bad because he killed a lot of people in 5 years.
Yeah.
So they told women had a curfew. They needed to go and, you know, go inside and stay off the streets at night. And the women go out and protest. Like, why are we staying inside at night? Why don't the men stay inside? They're the ones committing the crimes.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of fascinating. It was like, what?
Really fascinating.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, I would stay inside, but I can see why they wouldn't want
that aspect of it in this documentary.
Yeah.
That's a, I mean, the people's reaction, you know, the people in these towns, they're like, you know, wait a minute. Why aren't you catching this guy? I mean, he's killed how many people?
It was outrageous.
And he wasn't that brilliant.
He wasn't.
Killer. He was very, you know, it wasn't brilliant. He was very brutal, but it wasn't like, you know, he should have been caught a lot earlier.
And he left survivors.
He left
like people who had survived knew what he looked like. You know, it's like, you know, and he would do it like out in the open, like in big open fields or parks, like not hiding away. And he would like put some like old boxes over him to hide the bodies, like super lazy, because he knew the cops were lazy.
And even went back in some cases and put a newer newspaper in the hand of a victim. Or
he just totally thought he could get away with it, because
and he did for a long time.
He did for like 5 years.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. They did not show the Peter Sutcliffe. Is that his name?
Peter Sutcliffe. Yeah.
They didn't show him the entire time until like sort of like through the last episode. And so I liked that they concentrated on the women, and they put their names big on the screen, and they gave them the notice of, you know, they're the ones that we should be talking about. So then the killer almost was incidental until the very end.
Well, Well, that was the way the Night Stalker was. Even though the Night Stalker, the last episode was really about Ramirez, I think in this one, Sutcliffe, you don't get a lot of him at all. Like you never hear him. I mean, just some grainy, newspaper photos. Yeah. And I think, we do find out, that when he was a kid, there was an abusive relationship with his parents. His father was beating his mother, and he would side with his mother, and the father would call him a sissy and all this kind of stuff. So there was obviously some stuff that was happening. You get a little bit of that, but I would have loved to see even the last episode a little more Sutcliffe. Maybe there's just not videotape of him. I have no idea.
Well, there probably is. I mean,
yes,
I was kind of hoping for a little bit of a profile of him, like more of what type of a person he was, but then you have to weigh that with the other criticism that films like this get, is that they're glorifying the killer.
And this film was also criticized for that, but I didn't get that. I mean, I wasn't getting that at all. I mean, it's kind of
why glorifying what? I mean, what were they like?
Well, they don't like. Apparently, the victims' families didn't like that it was called The Ripper, the title, because they feel like it gave the killer prominence. But I'm like, but that. What are
you going to call it? I mean,
I know. What are we gonna call it, Peter Sutcliffe? No one's gonna watch that.
Yorkshire Murders or something. I don't know.
Yeah, the Yorkshire Murders, maybe.
The thing about that is, though, I think it's gonna glorify him to a person to whom that kind of thing has glorification already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're worried that somebody who's got a propensity for violence against women will see this and go, yeah, and get into it, in a weird, sick way, But the thing is, we have to know about these situations. We have to learn about them. And that's part of the information, is what kind of person he was. And also, do you know someone like this that, but then again, I guess I know the filmmakers probably went through a big struggle. Like, how much do we show of him? Yeah. How much of his manifesto do we show? Like with the Richard Ramirez, there were quotes by Ramirez during that documentary where they had his words, and you're wondering, is that going to trigger some misogynistic jackass to hurt a woman, to hear his words and to hear like, oh yeah, cool. He sounds like a comic book character, like a comic book villain, the way he's talking about the darkness and all this. To some people that, the people that the insurrectionists that tried to kill the Congress in the Capitol building, when you listen to their quotes and you listen to those videos and how they're talking, they're like, we are going to ignite a fire that can never be extinguished. This bullshit comic book dialogue. It's like direct to video.
The storm is coming.
The storm is coming, and you will not be able to withstand
Marvel?
Our power. It's like,
go back to your mother's basement, please.
Yeah,
we'll have the storm down there.
But it's like that kind of cheap direct-to-video bad villain dialogue that they're so into. And so you get the impression that people like that, who are prone to violence and who actually would kill somebody if they had a chance, and who arm themselves and weaponize themselves and become radicalized, like the Ripper became radicalized by his hatred of women and by this kind of idea of, I am the darkness, I am the villain, and I am the creep, the creeping Night Stalker.
He's obsessed with the Jack the Ripper,
Yeah.
Well, I think this. Yeah. I'm just going to say, I think that I think that those criticisms really don't hold a lot of water, because this to me was about how the police departments, all over Great Britain, just screwed up. I mean, they interviewed him Sutcliffe 9 times.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, are you kidding me?
That's a shocker in the film when you find out. It's like they had him,
and they threw him out because he didn't match the recording.
Right.
What?
So it was just idiotic police work. I mean,
should have been the other way around.
Pitiful police work.
Yeah.
And so I think that hits pretty hard. I mean, and that's the focus of this. It's not Peter Sutcliffe. I mean, I would like a little bit more, but I think the message is terrible. And also the times, the 70s, misogynistic. It was, it was just par for the course. And if you're a prostitute, you were a second banana. You're a second.
No one cares.
Even just women in general aren't taken as seriously as they should be by law enforcement. A lot of times, I mean, you hear that all the time when people, when somebody, you know, when someone accuses, sexual assault or rape or whatever, they're like, yeah, whatever, or why did you wait so long? Or why didn't you report it right away? Or why didn't you do this?
Yeah, they don't believe them at all.
Yeah, there's always that defensiveness. It's like, well, she's lying. She just wants attention. She wants to write a book,
Patriarchy is alive and well.
Well, yeah.
Well,
and you see it in this because even when the young girls, the innocent girls were being murdered, they still weren't taking it seriously enough.
No.
It was almost like, well, if you go out at night, you deserve whatever happens
so
to
just stay in. Let men go out.
And
the men can go out.
They interview a lot of these police detectives that are much older now, and you still get that sense for a couple of them, like, they did everything right, properly, It's like, no, you didn't. You
really
fucked it up.
didn't. I mean, I think I guess, it's hindsight, it's 2020, but I think when you're in the middle of that, there just still should have been more sensitivity toward the evidence and what it was actually telling you, and not going off the prostitutes, mantra that they were repeating over and over, so that when they were caught by surprise, when he didn't kill a prostitute, they thought, oh, just an anomaly. We'll just ignore this.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff where it's like, you guys, you're cops, figure it out, do something, be better.
That recording, they're just total reliance on that recording because it was literally all they had. It was the only thing they didn't destroy, overlook, or lose. They had this recording, and it was also something that looked good on the news. They could
very exciting.
And they played it, and they were, and they did.
They were so happy and so their chests were pumped out. They were just so
it's
thrilled.
Like, we found it.
It was like someone, Kathy and I remember, who was, when they asked him on a scale of 1 to 10, how sure are you that the people you just arrested are the perpetrators? And 11. It's like they want to look. The cops want to look really good on television, and because
they're getting a lot of criticism when they're not solving the crime.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I feel like they were reacting more to that than the actual attention to the crime itself. Like, we're under so much pressure, we have to solve it. So let's just take everything we get and use it as a prop. And that's sort of what they did.
And solving crimes is hard. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get into it and do it. Right. But
sometimes it takes years.
These guys, that's what they do. And, you really have to wonder sometimes what happens with their training and the fact that they just really did seem to drop the ball so many times. They talked to this guy over and over.
They talked to him, and they had a sketch that looked exactly like they had.
And he didn't even bother to shave off his beard and everything. And
it's just mind-boggling.
I think he kind of wanted to be caught in a weird way. I don't know. I felt like the two things this series really hit were the sense of what it was like to live in Great Britain in the Midlands in the mid to late 70s, the sadness of it, the dark, dank,
economically challenged areas that are sad.
And how the police just screwed it up. And Sutcliffe, the Ripper, is a tertiary or secondary character in the sense of what the story's about. So
another little interesting tidbit is that he died of COVID, in November. Past November. Like, that's right. How strange that somebody like that would get taken down by COVID. The prison systems are a mess right now too. But
well, there's another interesting thing that was a bit of a shocker twist kind of a thing in the documentary too. And this is not giving away. I mean, it's not like spoiler alert or anything with a crime documentary. You just, you want to watch it to get all the story and the facts and everything.
And learn about the victims.
Yeah. But the guy, Sutcliffe, who, I think Mark mentioned this earlier, that they had interviewed him 9 times.
Mm-hmm.
And the people where he worked who kept seeing the cops come in talking to this guy that they all knew, they were joking, and they actually gave him a nickname, and they called him the Ripper for like how many years that he had a nickname, the Ripper.
Wow.
And just because it's like, wow, you must be a suspect because they keep coming back to you over and over. And think about it, 9 times.
Yeah.
I mean, did someone not, it's funny, whenever I watch these documentaries, like we saw again, the Berlinger Bundy one, we watched Night Stalker, the endings always seem like this big stupid mistake, and they kind of stumble into the ending, and it's weird how many people seem to get caught almost by accident in these big crimes, and all this money spent trying to solve these crimes. And half the time, I don't even know if it's good police work. It seems like it's accidental. It's always like a good beat cop notices I mean, how many of these? I think almost every one of these stories, these last ones I mentioned, they were all caught by accident from some, cop on his beat found like, well, this is kind of weird, and
or a phone call out of the blue from a guy who says, "I think I know who the Ripper is.
My cousin
confessed to me. Yeah, and he's told me the story, and he said he killed those women, and his name is Richard Ramirez.
And he told me that like 3 years ago, but I didn't bother to do anything about it.
Or he told me that 3 years ago, and I called you guys, and I'm just wondering if you ever followed up on it. I called you 8 times about it.
Exactly. Well, if you're a woman, they will definitely just delete that call.
Well, that's what I think that makes it really fascinating, because if it always ends like that, so that's real life. That's what really happens. It's not a movie where, there's a great ending and a smart guy. It's just happenstance and, chaos theory at work.
It's true. It's not always follow the clue to the next clue to the next clue until you finally catch the guy. It's like you're following a tangent, dead end, have to come back, and you follow another tangent, dead end, another tangent. It's like, it's frustrating. And there's some huge difference. That's why there's a huge difference between reality and fictional crime solving films or serial killer films. You watch a film like, Silence of the Lambs or whatever, and it's step by step by step, and it's fun to watch those procedural steps towards, but that's why I think, these shows like this documentary, The Ripper and the Richard Ramirez one and the Bundy one, that's why they're so frustrating and depressing sometimes, is that you realize, wow, people really can commit horrible crimes and just get away with it for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the downer.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, like nowadays, it seems like it's a lot harder for that kind of a crime to be committed, because we have so much tracing of, GPSs in cars, GPSs in phones, videos, ring cameras, DNA, all the science. And it does seem like they're probably catching serial killers in the making before they really, take off for years, which is, thank goodness. So maybe there is some improvement on stopping serial killers when they start.
Plus police departments are talking to each other. That's all now.
Communication is better.
Computer networks now. Yeah.
Yeah, when you think about like the Bundy, how people in New Orleans or wherever actually had to read a newspaper. Look at this newspaper from Seattle. Yeah. What? I've never. They have a paper out there.
They have news there. What?
Sounds like our guy.
Yeah.
There's some unsolved murders there. We should check into it. Yeah. It's amazing. But I really like I thought The Ripper is really well produced, and I can sort of understand the criticism, but I think any documentary about a serial killer, because they're the big name, and if you're going to call it the Night Stalker, you're going to call it Bundy, you're going to call it The Ripper. If you're going to get eyeballs on the documentary, you're going to have to tell people what it's about, and it's usually about the killer. Now, once you get in there, you can start getting to know the victims and explain the dynamics of why the crimes went on because of sexism and bad police work. But you still have to get them in there, and I don't think it's necessarily glorifying a killer. And I don't want to disagree with the victims' families, but I didn't get a sense of glorification of killers in these documentaries. I mean, I can see that Ted Bundy almost, not necessarily that Joe Berlinger did this, but I can see why, because it's a little more current and he was really charming and good looking, whereas, these other guys were not. But I think that's all part of the whole like strange like zeitgeist around this kind of crime, is that they become celebrities, and you have to sort of address that in a way too. So I think that this did a good job. The great time capsule footage is amazing. Yeah. Hearing some of these victims who are still alive talk, it's like, I thought it was fascinating just in and of itself, seeing that just written during that time. Too. Yeah. So, I recommend it just as, just to see the whole concept of the sexism in and Britain during that time is fascinating.
Right.
I think with the glorification idea, I think the worry isn't so much that it's going to glorify the killer to people like us. It's that it's going to glorify the killer to people who have a propensity for that,
But I feel like anything would incite them,
Yeah, well, that's true. But, the fact that, the people we were talking about, the people that attacked our Capitol were incited by something, by a person and an idea, an untrue, a fraudulent idea of a stolen election triggered these people. It basically glorified the idea of a crime, of murdering Congress people and American elected politicians. There were people who went in there saying, I am going to kill these people. I'm going to hang someone. I'm going to, and it's like, if there hadn't been an inciting event, would those people have done that? Would they have just, been maybe, go to the rallies or whatever, but then go home and just say, oh, we lost the election, better luck next time. But I think in some ways there are people who are really gullible and really open to suggestion from the outside that's going to push them over the edge, and they're going to pick up their guns or their knives and they're going to go out and try to kill somebody. And I think that's the trouble sometimes, the worry that filmmakers have with documentaries about serial killers and murderers, that a certain kind of person is going to see that person as a hero or as a wonderful, like
somebody to emulate.
That's how I feel too.
Because they hate women too.
And those people all talk to each other. It's, now with social media, they're all on these crazy sites and they build each other up, and that's their truth. It's not the truth. It's their truth. And they don't think it's a crime to go into the Capitol. They think they're freedom free, whatever. They're thinking
things that seem insane to people like us don't seem insane to an insane person. An unhinged person sees that as like a heroic act.
Yeah,
like I'm making the world a better place by killing all these horrible women.
Well, plus I think there's just a more cold-hearted reason it's called The Ripper. The reason it's called The Night Stalker is Netflix wants people to watch this show, and The Ripper is going to get. Yeah, it's very simple marketing, and I hate to say it, but that's it got made because it's going to be called The Ripper. They didn't give them money and have it called something esoteric that nobody's going to understand.
And, if you're going to get people in there that want to see a movie or a documentary about the Ripper, and they get in there and learn about the victims, all the better.
Absolutely.
They get names and faces and the kids they had and their lives and the people that still miss them. It's like, that's important, because I do feel like the killers a lot of times do get all the attention, and then the victims kind of recede into the background.
True crime documentaries are inherently going to have horrible things in them. I mean, that's what.
Don't be surprised.
That's just what it is.
There's some really nasty stuff in this. Even just the crime scenes and descriptions of what he did. I mean, he was a sick fuck.
This is degrading, And the other thing I think that these kind of documentaries give us is a look at the police work, and the failures and the successes of the police work. What works and what doesn't work. With the Richard Ramirez documentary that we talked about in another podcast, the police in that were presented as these wonderful, heroic guys, but nothing's perfect, obviously. And come over here.
It's Darwin making a guest appearance. He goes, "You sound upset."
Yeah.
Let me see.
I miss Darwin.
I know, I do too.
Look at the camera.
Good little puppy.
You see my knuckleheads walking in and out sometimes.
But yeah, I mean, these documentaries are horrifying, but it's good it's good to see how the police work, and it's not always, the idea that the police are always right and they always catch their man doesn't always happen, and we really should be on our on our toes watching the police and how they do it.
Right.
Especially in this Ripper situation, the people around there kind of knew it too. I think the women who were protesting and saying, "Look, you police need to work on this more. It's not, these women are women. They're human beings that are just like these innocent people you're talking about. It's like, and it's not our fault that you can't catch these people. And if it's a men who are doing the murder, if it's a man who's doing the murder, why not make it illegal for men to be out on the street right now? Why take the women off the street?
That would have taken I think they would have caught him sooner. But of course, they had 9 opportunities when he was in their police precinct. So anyway, they
it was that tunnel vision. I think a lot of cops get, where they think they know who it is and they just don't want to waste their time on people that don't fit this narrow view. But that's the thing I learned from Joe Kenda, is that you do not do that. You have to look at everybody equally, because by going tunnel vision, you miss out on all the opportunities to catch the actual killer.
Yeah.
And you have to look at everyone. Every piece of evidence is another avenue, and sometimes they don't coalesce perfectly, and you have to also reconcile that and how it's fitting into the puzzle, because something you're using as your main piece of evidence may not be the actual one you need to be looking at.
And also, sadly and creepily, I wonder sometimes how often the police say, well, yeah, we could say no men on the street after a certain time so that the women would be safe. And if we see men out, but then they might be thinking, yeah, but that takes our killer off the street. That takes him out of circulation. And they might have in the back of their minds, or spoken secretly at their secret meetings, they might be saying, we need to not do something that will stop him. We need to, if he strikes again, it gives us more and more opportunity to catch him. And if we take men out of the equation, then
you can just go into hibernation,
go to some other town or something,
Right.
And they even said that in Night Stalker, where they were like, I don't want someone else to die, but it's not another opportunity for him to make a mistake and leave another piece of evidence. So,
right.
It is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
So I really liked this documentary in a whole different way because of the time capsule aspect. I think was the most amazing part.
It's on Netflix, readily available, and I think it's well done. And I think we had a really good podcast. What do you think?
I think so. And you guys need to tell us in the comments.
That was my segue. We didn't at the start of the show. We didn't talk about that. You should subscribe and like. So we'll do it right now. Subscribe to our podcast, like, and please comment. Did you watch The Ripper? Did you like it? Did you have some?
Did you see problems with it? Like,
are we right about how our assessment of this thing and the
we're
police
right.
work? And
we're definitely right. I just want to hear people say that they're wrong.
Exactly.
Admit your error.
How many different people can be wrong, or how many people can be wrong differently? Anyway.
Yes.
Different people wrong. Yes.
But also go to our website, cinemandopodcast.com.
You can find links to everything there.
Yes. And
let us know if you want to see us cover more true crime. It seems to get good. We get a good response when we do true crime. And, we do have that connection that we keep talking about that, Kathy and I kind of have a
very cryptically.
Yeah. Well, we
used to be detectives. We'll just admit it now. We used to be law enforcement. No, we did not. We were not. Just movie fans.
No, but they got very involved in the West Memphis 3, of course, and we have a podcast on that too. So go back and
episode 91.
Yeah, episode 91. Very
good.
So
sorry.
Those
dogs very loud.
That's okay. They're getting into it.
Maybe they're hungry. Have you
my
fed
dog
them?
Jones? He's like, stop podcasting right now.
Yes,
I want food.
I am hungry.
Well, because Jones.
I think that's
is
what
saying
Darwin
stuff.
just told me.
I think our dogs are coming in.
My dogs are out of the room, thankfully, but I'm sure they feel the same way. But
that's true.
Listen,
I could close my door.
That's okay. But thanks for always for watching and listening.
Back.
Watching and listening and saying hi to our dogs.
And if there's other ideas for anything else, not true crime, any old
movie or show you want us to cover, just write to us.
Film noir, we do old TV series, all kinds of things. We love talking about all things entertainment. So please don't, you can email us at cinemandopodcast@gmail.com, or of course on any of the social media platforms. We're on all of them. So thanks very much as always for listening. I'm Mark from the hinterlands up north. Foothills.
Kathy from I will not divulge my secret location.
Los Angeles, greater LA area.
He's being very talkative right now.
He is. He's really got something to tell me. He's got
okay.
something.
Well, we'll let you go and have your discussion with Darwin. He desperately wants to have.
Yeah. Boy, he's like pushing me out of the chair.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, everybody. Bye.
See you.
The corner.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Look at Darwin's face right there.
I know. He's like giving that stink guy. Like, shut up already.
Shut up.
God. Bye.
See ya.
Cinemando signing off.